The first bullet hit the fence post 6 inches from Josiah Kane's head. The second and third chewed into the dirt at his feet, kicking up dust that tasted like copper. In trouble. He didn't run, didn't duck, didn't reach for a gun he wasn't carrying. Instead, Josiah Kane set down his hammer, straightened his back, and turned to face the three riders coming in from the east. The morning sun blazed behind them, turning them into dark shapes against the Montana skyline. He was 52 years old, hair the color of iron and ash, eyes like storm clouds before lightning strikes, hands calloused from 10 years of ranch work, but scarred from something older. Something he'd tried to bury along with the man he used to be. The riders stopped 50 feet out, close enough to talk, close enough to kill. The lead man wore a deputy's badge pinned crooked on his vest. Garrett Vance, 32 years old, lean and hungry, with a holster tied low on his thigh the way gunfighters wore them. The leather was worn smooth where his hand had practiced the draw 10,000 times. The two men flanking him spread wide without being told. Virgil Hobbs on the left, face like carved granite, showing nothing. Lyle Fenner on the right, younger, nervous, hand already resting on his pistol grip. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. Vance smiled the smile of a man holding a winning hand. Kane, Josiah Kane. He said the name like he was tasting something bitter. Heard you used to be somebody, Marshall Kane of Abilene, the man who put down 4 Daltons in one night. The smile widened into something cruel. Now look at you, old man fixing fences. Josiah said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence made men reveal more than they intended. Vance pulled a rolled paper from his coat and tossed it to the ground. Seizure notice. Unpaid taxes on this property. You've got 30 days to clear out, or we come back and help you pack. He leaned forward in his saddle, leather creaking. Personally, I'm hoping you choose the hard way. Josiah looked at the paper lying in the dust, looked back at Vance, looked at the 2 men positioned for crossfire on either side. Then he bent down, picked up the paper, unrolled it, read it carefully, folded it with deliberate slowness, and put it in his pocket. I'll speak with a lawyer. Vance laughed loud and sharp. Hobbs and Fenner joined him, their laughter carrying across the empty land. A lawyer in Stillwater Bend? Vance shook his head like a teacher disappointed in a slow student. My father-in-law owns this town, Kane. He owns the lawyers. He owns the judges. He owns the badge I'm wearing. He patted his holster with an open palm. And he owns what this badge can do. 30 days, Josiah said quietly. I heard you. He turned his back on 3 armed men, picked up his hammer, went back to fixing the fence post they'd shot. For a long moment, no one moved. They'd ridden out here expecting confrontation. Maybe fear, maybe begging. They got neither. Vance's smile faded into something darker. Don't think your age will protect you, Kane. What you did 10 years ago doesn't mean anything today. Clock's ticking. The 3 riders turned their horses and left, trailing dust like smoke signals warning of fire to come. Josiah didn't watch them go. He kept his eyes on the fence, driving nails with steady hands that hadn't trembled in 30 years of facing down killers. That was the problem. They should have trembled. Any sane man would shake after being shot at by 3 gunmen. But Josiah Kane's hands remembered something his mind had tried to forget. They remembered the weight of iron, the kick of a Colt, the way a man falls when a bullet finds his heart. That evening he stood alone in his kitchen. The house was too quiet now, too empty. 8 months since
30 days! Clear out! I'll speak with a lawyer.
Constance passed, and he still slept on his side of the bed, still set 2 cups on the table each morning before remembering. On the wall hung their wedding photograph. Constance with her warm brown eyes and the smile that made him believe a man could change, could leave the blood behind, could become someone worth loving. By the fireplace stood an oak cabinet with iron hinges. Inside, if he opened it, was a leather case sealed with rawhide ties. Inside that case were 2 Colt Peacemakers with walnut grips and 7.5-inch barrels. Engraved on the backstrap of each gun were 3 letters, J.C., Abilene, 1872. Those guns had sent 27 men to their graves. Josiah didn't open the cabinet. He stood before it for a long time, his reflection ghosting across the polished wood, then turned away. I promised you, he said to the empty room, to the photograph, to the ghost of the woman who had saved him from himself. No more blood. The next morning, Josiah rode into Stillwater Bend. The landed office clerk wouldn't meet his eyes. Face pale as curdled milk, voice shaking like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. The paperwork is legal, Mr. Kane. Tax debt of $847. Due in 28 days. I don't owe taxes. I have receipts for every payment that I've ever made. Our records show differently. Whose signature is on that document? The clerk didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the truth sitting between them like a loaded gun. Josiah stepped outside into the morning sun. A fine carriage waited in the street, black lacquer polished to a mirror shine, brass fittings gleaming, pulled by two matched gray horses worth more than most men earned in 5 years. The door swung open. Judge Silas Blackwood stepped down onto the dusty street, 62 years old, silver hair swept back from a high forehead, black silk vest over a crisp white shirt, gold watch chain catching the light. But his eyes told the real story. Predator's eyes, not cold exactly, but calculating, measuring everything and everyone for profit and threat. Marshal Kane. Blackwood's voice was smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. Or should I say a former marshal? You're Blackwood, and you're the man standing on land I intend to own. Blackwood moved closer, completely unafraid. Men with money often confused wealth with invincibility. Your wife is dead. The land is just dirt now. Sell it, take the money, live out your remaining years in comfort somewhere far from here. That land was my wife's dream, everything we built together. Dreams die with the dreamers, Kane. That's the nature of things. Blackwood's eyes narrowed to slits. I'm offering you a choice, more than I offer most people who stand in my way. And if I refuse, then the result will be the same, only the road will be harder. He turned back to his carriage, dismissing Josiah like a servant. 28 days. Use them wisely. The carriage rolled away, iron-rimmed wheels crunching over gravel, leaving Josiah alone in the middle of the street while the townspeople watched from behind curtained windows. No one came out. No one offered help. No one even nodded in his direction. He understood. Fear was a currency in this valley, and Blackwood had bought the town's silence long ago. 5 nights later, Josiah woke to the smell of smoke. His barn was burning. Flames roared 30 feet high, painting the night in shades of orange and red and terrible gold. 4 months of hay, his tools, saddles, harnesses, everything inside turning to ash and an ember while he watched helplessly. On the whitewashed wall of his house, someone had painted words in black tar that dripped like old blood. Leave or burn with it. Josiah stood in his night clothes and watched until the fire consumed everything inside. He watched the roof collapse inward with a roar of sparks. He watched until nothing remained but smoking timbers and the smell of destruction. Then, at dawn, he started cleaning up. 7 days after the fire, 11 cattle lay dead around the water trough.
I paid every year.
These are the receipts.
Our records say otherwise.
Floated in the afternoon sun, flies swarming so thick they looked like shifting black blankets. The stench reached him 50 yards away, sweet and rotten and wrong. He checked the water, metallic taste, faint smell of almonds underneath the corruption. Arsenic. Someone had poisoned his stock deliberately, choosing a method designed for maximum suffering. Old McCready came to help bury the carcasses. 68 years old, white beard stained yellow with tobacco, eyes still sharp from years as a Union cavalry scout during the war between the states. They won't stop, McCready said, driving his shovel into the rocky earth. I know. So why aren't you doing anything about it? Josiah paused his digging, leaning on his shovel, sweat running down his face despite the cool autumn air. How many men did you kill in the war, McCready? The old man was quiet for a long time, staring at nothing. Enough to lose sleep over, enough that some nights I still see their faces. 27. That's my count. I remember every face, every last breath rattling out of their lungs, every different way they fell. He went back to digging, muscles burning. Constance was the only one who made the faces stop visiting me at night. She's gone now, but the promise I made her isn't. And if they kill you, then at least I die as the man she believed I could be, not the man I was before. 6 days later, Orrin Bradshaw came riding in hard and fast, 42 years old, the only rancher in the valley who still acknowledged Josiah in town, who still tipped his hat and said good morning. His face was purple with fresh bruises, one eye swollen completely shut. His right arm hung at a wrong angle, bones showing white through torn and bloody skin. 3 men, Orrin gasped, sliding from his saddle and collapsing into the dirt. Vance and 2 others caught me on the road coming back from town. What did they say? Tell Kane the next one won't have an arm left to break. He looked up with his one good eye, shame and fear written across his battered face. Josiah, I have a wife. I have children. I can't afford to. I know. Josiah helped him stand, taking his weight. Go home, Orrin. Lock your doors. Stay there until this is finished. Don't come back here. I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. You have family to protect. That's what a man is supposed to do. Orrin rode away slowly, cradling his broken arm, and Josiah stood in the silence of his empty yard. Completely alone now. No allies, no friends willing to risk Blackwood's wrath. Just him and the ghosts of the men he'd killed. That night, Josiah sat in complete darkness. No lamp, no fire in the hearth, just pale moonlight filtering through the window and the photograph of Constance watching him from the wall with those warm brown eyes he'd loved for 9 precious years. I tried, he said aloud, first words he had spoken to her since the funeral. His voice cracked on the silence. God knows I tried. 9 years of trying to be someone different, someone better, someone worthy of you. The photograph didn't answer. The dead never do. But they won't stop. They'll keep burning my property, keep killing my animals, keep hurting anyone foolish enough to stand near me, and eventually, when they have taken everything else, they'll come for me directly. He stood slowly, bones aching, walked to the oak cabinet by the fireplace. His hand rested on the carved door, feeling the grain of the wood beneath his calloused palm. You wanted me to live differently. I did. 9 years without drawing iron on another man. But you also wanted me to live, to serve it, and they won't allow that unless I make them understand the only language men like them speak. He opened the cabinet. Inside sat a standard Colt Peacemaker with a plain wooden grip, the one he used for rattlesnakes and coyotes. He reached past it, his hand going deeper. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth that hadn't been touched in a decade, was a leather case he'd sworn never to open again. He pulled it out, untied the rawhide with fingers that trembled slightly. Inside lay 2 Colt Peacemakers with walnut grips carved with intricate scrollwork that caught the moonlight like frozen lightning. 7.5-inch barrels, blued steel now showing the faintest patina of age. The action smooth as water from 1,000 hours of practice long ago. These weren't ranch guns for killing snakes. These were the guns of Marshal Josiah Kane. The guns that ended the Dalton brothers in a Wichita saloon. That put down Red Morgan and his gang in the streets of Abilene.
Sell the land. Walk away in comfort.
Oh. That land was our life.
That made grown men cross to the other side of the street rather than meet his gaze. These guns had killed 27 men, and they remembered how. If I have to do this one last time, he said softly to the darkness, I'll do it right. 3 days of preparation followed. He stripped the guns down to their smallest components: cylinder, barrel, hammer, trigger, assembly, every spring and pin and screw. Cleaned each piece with gun oil until the metal gleamed, checking for rust, wear, any weakness that might cause failure at the critical moment. He replaced the hammer springs with new ones from his supplies, the originals having weakened from a decade of disuse. He loaded 12 rounds of .45 long Colt ammunition, 6 in each cylinder, 12 more slotted into his gun belt, brass casings bright against dark leather. Then he began to practice. 50 draws each morning as the sun rose, 50 more each evening as it set. The first day, his time was slow, rusty, 4/10 of a second from leather to level. By the third day, he'd cut that to 3/10, his hands remembering what his mind had tried to forget. Muscle memory never truly fades. It only sleeps, waiting to be awakened. He walked every inch of his property, measuring distances by stride. 50 feet from porch to front gate, 35 feet to the water trough. Calculated angles of fire from every position. Noted which spots offered cover, which left a man exposed. Checked the direction of the setting sun, where it would hang at dusk. If he stood on the porch with his back to the west, anyone approaching from the east would have the dying light blazing directly into their eyes. Old MacCready came on the third evening, his horse lathered from hard riding. Vance is gathering his men, tomorrow at sundown. They're coming to finish this. How many? 3. Vance, Hobbs, Fenner. They think that's enough for one old rancher. Josiah nodded, checking the action on the left-hand Colt, listening to the smooth click of the cylinder rotating. Josiah, MacCready's voice was heavy with concern. Are you certain about this? It's been 10 years since you've faced another man with iron. Some things a man doesn't forget, MacCready, no matter how desperately he wants to. The morning of the 28th day arrived cold and clear. Josiah rose before dawn, painted the mountains pink. He worked the ranch like any other day, fed and watered the horses, checked the fence line he'd spent so long repairing, moved through the familiar rhythms of the life he'd built with Constance, a life of peace and honest labor. In the afternoon, he heated water and bathed carefully, shaved his weathered face until it was smooth, put on a clean white shirt, black trousers, leather boots polished until they shone. He strapped on the twin Colts. The holsters rode low on his hips, tie-down straps secured at his thighs, exactly the way he'd worn them a decade and a lifetime ago. The weight was familiar, too familiar. At 5 o'clock, with the sun beginning its descent toward the western peaks, he walked up the hill to Constance's grave. The headstone was simple gray granite. Her name, the years that bracketed her life, nothing more. She'd always hated unnecessary decoration. Around it grew wildflowers in purple and yellow, the colors she'd loved most, spreading wider each year. I made you a promise, he said, his voice rough. No more killing. I kept that promise for 9 years. He knelt stiffly on the cold ground, touched the cool stone with work-roughened fingers. Tonight, I'm probably going to break it. If I do, I'll carry that weight alongside all the others. If I don't survive what's coming, I'll see you soon on the other side. He placed a wildflower on the grave, purple and yellow petals bright against gray stone. But if I live through this, I swear on everything I hold sacred, the guns go back in the box. Forever this time. I won't touch them again. He walked back down the hill as the sun continued its slow fall toward the mountains. Time to finish this, one way or another. They came at sundown, right on schedule. Dust rose from the east road, catching the golden light.
I promised. No more blood. I'll protect what we built.
3 riders moving at a deliberate pace, in no hurry, confident, certain of their victory. Josiah stood on his porch, positioned exactly where he'd planned. The dying sun blazed at his back, a wall of amber fire that would shine directly into their eyes. The riders stopped at 50 feet and dismounted in unison. Their horses, well-trained, stood still without being tied. They spread into formation without needing to speak. They'd done this before. Garrett Vance in the center, settling 35 feet out. Holster loose, fingers flexing near the grip of his pistol. Virgil Hobbs to the left, 40 feet away. Stone-faced and professional, stance relaxed but ready, revealing nothing of his intentions. Lyle Fenner to the right, 45 feet out. Young and twitchy, hand trembling, slightly near his gun, fear barely hidden behind false bravado. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was wind pushing through dry grass and the distant call of a crow. Kane, Vance broke the heavy silence first. 28 days are up. Time to settle accounts. I've been counting. Vance's eyes dropped to the twin Colts riding on Josiah's hips. Something flickered across his face. Not fear, not yet, but recognition of what those guns meant. Heard you gave up the iron, hung up your reputation. I did. You and your friends brought it back. Blackwood sent a final message, out of respect for what you used to be. Last chance to walk away breathing. Get on your horse. Ride north until you hit Canada. Never come back. Nobody has to bleed today. Tell Blackwood I'll send my own message. After I'm finished with you three. Vance's jaw tightened. Hobbs remained motionless as stone. Fenner's hand twitched again, closer to his gun. 1 against 3, Kane. You're 52 years old, a decade out of practice. The smart bet isn't on you. In '74, I faced 4 Dalton brothers in a Wichita saloon, 10 seconds from first shot to last. 4 men dead on the floor when the smoke cleared. Josiah's voice was flat, empty of emotion, empty of doubt. You're only 3. The wind died completely. Even the crow went silent. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Last chance, Vance said quietly, his hand drifting closer to his holster. But Fenner's nerve shattered first. The young man's hand dropped in a blur of motion, fingers closing around the grip of his pistol, yanking it upward. Too fast. Too panicked. Acting on fear before Vance gave any signal. A fatal mistake. The last mistake Lyle Fenner would ever make. Josiah's right hand moved. 10 years of peaceful mornings and quiet evenings. 10 years of keeping a promise to a woman with warm brown eyes. 10 years of trying to be a different man. None of it mattered now. The hands knew what the mind had tried to forget. The cold cleared leather in a motion too fast to follow, a blur of blue steel and walnut. Hammer back, barrel rising, finger finding the trigger with the precision of 10,000 repetitions burned into bone and sinew. The gun roared, belching fire and smoke. Fenner was still lifting his pistol, barrel not yet level, when the bullet punched through his chest. The impact spun him sideways, a spray of crimson mist catching the golden sunset light. He fell backward without firing a single shot, gun tumbling from fingers that would never grip anything again. Josiah pivoted left, smooth, economical, no wasted motion. Hobbs was fast enough to be dangerous, a professional who'd killed before. His gun was already up, hammer cocked, barrel leveling on Josiah's heart. 2 shots split the air, so close together they sounded almost like one. Hobbs' bullet tore through Josiah's left shoulder, spinning him half around. Fire and ice and the hot wetness of blood soaking through his clean white shirt. Pain like a branding iron pressed to flesh. Josiah's bullet caught Hobbs in the throat, just above the collarbone. The gunman made a wet, choking sound, trigger finger convulsing, firing one last shot into the dirt as he crumpled forward onto his face. But Vance had used those precious seconds well. His gun was out, aimed, the hammer already falling. Josiah threw himself sideways, wounded shoulder screaming in protest, rolling off the edge of the porch as Vance's shot cracked past his ear and shattered the window behind him in an explosion of glass. He came up on one knee, dust on his clothes and blood running down his arm, both Colts raised and steady despite the pain lancing through his body. Vance was already cocking his pistol for a second shot, moving with the smooth efficiency of a man who'd won gunfights before. But not fast enough, not this time. Josiah fired twice in rapid succession. The first bullet hit Vance high in the right side of his chest, staggering him backward. The second buried itself in his stomach, doubling him over. The deputy stood there for a frozen moment, looking down at the spreading crimson stains on his vest with an expression of pure disbelief. His pistol slipped from nerveless fingers and thudded into the dust. His mouth open, perhaps to speak, perhaps to curse, perhaps to pray. Then his knees buckled, and Garrett Vance fell backward into the Montana dirt. Silence rushed in to fill the void left by gunfire. The echo of the last shot faded into the evening air, replaced by the soft whisper of wind through grass. Powder smoke drifted across the yard like morning fog, thick and acrid. 4 seconds, 3 men down. It was finished. Josiah rose to his feet slowly, his left arm hanging useless at his side, blood dripping from his fingertips to darken the dust. His shoulder burned with every heartbeat, but he'd been shot before. He'd survive. He walked to the bodies, each step careful and deliberate. Hobbs was dead. The throat wound had been instantly fatal, blood pooling black beneath him. Vance was dead, eyes open and staring at the darkening sky, seeing nothing. But Fenner, the young one, the nervous one who'd broken first, he was still breathing. Shallow and ragged, bubbles of blood forming at his lips, but alive. The bullet had passed through his chest at an angle, missing his heart by 2 inches. Josiah stood over the wounded man, Colt in hand, looking down. Fenner's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain, white with terror. "Do it," he whispered, each word a struggle. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "Finish it, please." Josiah looked at him for a long moment. Then he holstered the Colt. No. He knelt with a grunt of pain from his own wound, tore strips from his own shirt, and began binding Fenner's chest, pressure on the entry wound, pressure on the exit, enough to slow the bleeding, maybe enough to save his life. "Why?" Fenner gasped. "Because you're going to live. You're going to ride back to town and tell everyone exactly what happened here tonight. Tell Blackwood. Tell the whole territory. Let them know what you witnessed. He'll kill me for failing. Maybe he will, or maybe you'll be smart enough to keep riding, north, west, anywhere but here. Start fresh somewhere, nobody knows your name." Josiah finished the bandage and hauled Fenner up, half dragging him to his horse, boosting him into the saddle despite the agony in his own shoulder. "You've got a choice now, boy. Same choice I had 10 years ago. Take it or waste it. That's on you." He slapped the horse hard on the rump. The animal bolted eastward, carrying its wounded rider toward the distant lights of town. Josiah watched until horse and rider vanished into the gathering darkness. Then he turned back to his property, 2 bodies cooling in the dust, 2 more graves to dig come morning. 29 now. The count would never get smaller, only larger. But not tonight. Tonight he would bind his wound, sit in the quiet of his empty house, and try not to see the faces of the men he'd just killed joining all the others in his dreams. 3 days later, Josiah rode into Stillwater Bend. His left arm was bound tight against his chest. His face was pale from blood loss, dark circles under his eyes. But the twin Colts hung at his hips, and his gaze was the gaze of the man he'd spent a decade trying not to be. The main street emptied at his approach. Doors slammed shut, curtains jerked closed. Shop owners retreated into their stores. Even the trauma slunk away into alleys. He stopped his horse in front of the courthouse, looked up at the second-floor window, where a shadow moved nervously behind the glass. "Blackwood!" His voice carried through the silent town like a thunderclap. "Show yourself." A long, tense pause. Then the curtain pulled aside. Judge Silas Blackwood appeared behind the glass, his face gray as old ash, his eyes sunk deep in their sockets. "3 men," Josiah called up to him. "You sent 3 men to murder me. 2 of them are buried on my land now. The 3rd is halfway to Wyoming if he's got any sense left in his head. You killed a deputy of the law." Blackwood's voice was thin, strained, stripped of its former smooth confidence. "You murdered an officer of this court. I killed 3 men who came to my home with guns drawn and murder in their eyes. That's not murder. That's a man defending what's his." Josiah let the words hang in the air. "Here's what happens now. You withdraw every piece of fake paperwork you filed against me. You leave this valley and never return. You forget my name and forget I exist. You're threatening a federal judge? I'm making a promise to the man who sent killers to my door." Josiah's right hand came to rest on the grip of his Colt. This time there were men standing between us. Next time there won't be anyone in the way. Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Blackwood stared down from his window. Josiah stared up from the street. Neither blinked. Finally, the judge's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "I'll review the paperwork. You have 1 week. After that, I come looking for you personally." Josiah turned his horse and rode out of town the same way he'd come in, alone, unhurried, like a man who had already faced down death and found it wanting. 1 week later, the fraudulent tax documents disappeared from the county records as if they'd never existed. 2 weeks later, Judge Silas Blackwood announced his sudden retirement due to failing health and relocated permanently to San Francisco. He never returned to Montana. 1 month later, life in the valley began returning to normal. The other ranchers kept their land, their water rights, their futures. The syndicate that had backed Blackwood quietly dissolved and sought easier pickings elsewhere. And Josiah Kane went home. The twin Colts went back into their leather case. The case went back into the oak cabinet. The cabinet door closed with a quiet click that sounded like a chapter ending. He never opened it again. 10 years passed like water flowing downstream. Josiah Kane at 62 still worked his ranch, still rose before dawn to tend his horses and check his fences, still slept on his side of the bed, though the other side had been empty for nearly 2 decades now. His hair had gone completely white. His hands were gnarled with arthritis on cold mornings. But his back was still straight, and he still moved with the economy of motion that marked a man who'd survived by being faster and more alert than those who wanted him dead. Sometimes young cowboys drifting through the territory would stop at his gate, drawn by stories that had grown taller with each retelling over the years. "You Marshall Kane?" they'd ask, eyes bright with hero worship. "The one who faced the Dalton gang in Wichita? Who cleaned out Abilene single-handed? Who killed 3 men in 4 seconds when you were past 50? Josiah would look at them with eyes that had witnessed more death than any man should carry. "Just a rancher," he'd say, "nothing more." But they'd notice the way he stood, weight balanced, hands naturally positioned. They'd see the old scars on his fingers, the way his gaze tracked movement at the edges of vision. They'd sense the stillness in him that spoke of absolute certainty, and they'd know the truth even if he wouldn't speak it. Some men can put down the gun, can walk away from the blood and the killing, can build themselves a different life in a quiet place. But the gun never truly lets go of them. It waits in the darkness, patient and eternal, knowing that sooner or later the world will come calling for what it's owed. On quiet evenings when the sky turned purple and gold, Josiah would walk slowly up the hill to Constance's grave. The wildflowers had spread over the years, a carpet of purple and yellow covering the ground around her simple headstone. Butterflies danced among the blooms in summer. In winter, snow covered everything in peaceful white. 9 years of peace, he'd say softly, lowering himself to sit beside her stone. Then one bloody day when I broke my promise. Then 10 more years of peace to make up for it. The wind would move through the tall grass, carrying the scent of sage and distant mountains. I think that's a fair accounting. I hope you do too. He'd place a fresh wildflower against the granite, purple and yellow petals bright against gray stone, then push himself up with a grunt and walk back down the hill as the sun disappeared behind the peaks. A man fights for what he loves. Sometimes what he loves is a piece of Montana dirt with a creek running through it and a grist on a quiet hillside. But that's enough. That's all any man really needs to make a life worth living and worth defending.
Josiah Kane's story offers a profound lesson about steadfastness and the limits of patience. He once lived amidst violence, but because of his love and a promise to his deceased wife, he chose a quiet life of honest work and avoided gunfire. However, when evil, disguised as power, used fraudulent laws to seize land, burn property, harm livestock, and threaten innocent people, Josiah understood that silence only encouraged the wicked. The lesson here is, kindness does not mean weakness, and forgiveness does not mean letting others trample on you. Sometimes, protecting the most important values, family, honor, the fruits of one's labor, requires a firm stance. But what is admirable is that Josiah did not fight out of hatred, but for justice and survival. After all, he still chose to return to peace, proving that true strength lies in controlling one's own power,